He arrives in headlines like a quiet tide, inexorable, reshaping the shoreline before most people notice. Daniel Křetínský is the kind of billionaire who prefers to let deals speak for him, an outsider in Western boardrooms, a meticulous builder of industrial scale and retail reach, and a figure whose moves have remade European energy, media, and retail in less than 2 decades. This is the story of how a lawyer from Brno became one of Europe's most consequential and least ostentatious dealmakers. Born on July 9, 1975, in Brno, then part of Czechoslovakia, Křetínský's early life sits comfortably inside the world he would later transform, a mix of intellectual influence and post-communist flux. His family background gave him unusual exposure to the worlds of science and law. His father worked in academia and his mother served in the judiciary. Those two spheres, rigorous analysis and a feel for institutional systems, would later show up in his approach to business. Careful, methodical, and willing to work within complicated regulatory and political environments to achieve sweeping commercial outcomes. He trained as a lawyer, which matters. A legal education teaches you to see contracts and incentives where others see only companies or industries. It helps you dissect risk, structure deals, and exploit opportunities that are invisible to people who think in balance sheets alone. In 1999, he joined J&T, the Slovak-Czech investment bank and private equity group, first as a lawyer and soon after as a partner. That experience gave him an apprenticeship in dealcraft, learning how to fold capital, influence, and timing into transactions that could change the ownership of entire sectors. The first major inflection point came with energy. When J&T and other partners helped found Energetický a průmyslový holding, EPH, in 2009, Kretinsky saw an asset class ripe for consolidation. Over the next decade, he transformed EPH from a regional holding into a sprawling energy platform with stakes across Central and Western Europe, power plants, gas pipelines, trading desks, and a portfolio that could be reshaped to suit a changing market. Where others might have treated energy as a static, regulatory business, he treated it as modular: buy the plants, optimize operations, use trading to smooth cash flows, and then compound scale. That approach made EPH the backbone of his fortune and influence. But Kretinsky's playbook did not stop with kilowatts and pipelines. He evolved into a diversified investor, the kind who quietly accumulates stakes across retail, media, and services that touch everyday life. He added grocery chains and retail holdings to his portfolio, including a significant stake in Britain's Sainsbury, and investments in French and Central European retailers. He bought into media outlets and postal assets, positioning himself as an owner who could do more than extract value. He could move the strategy, the management, and sometimes the public conversation around those assets. The result was a portfolio that read like a map of consumer Europe: supermarkets, newspapers, logistics, all of which amplified both cash flow and strategic optionality. 2 traits explain how he did it. First, patience. Křetínský rarely brags. He accumulates stakes and waits for moments when companies are vulnerable, undervalued, or distracted. Second, strategic fluency across sectors. He doesn't merely invest in a business. He sees how an energy asset can complement trading operations, how a logistics asset can be used to fold a retail chain into a broader supply network, or how media ownership gives a window into consumer sentiment and regulatory climates. That multi-dimensional thinking allowed him to use capital with the sort of chessboard vision that rewards consolidation and coordinated moves. His style has a name in markets. He is the quiet consolidator. It's a dangerous label for anyone who values publicity, because it implies leverage without spectacle. But for corporate rivals and governments, it means a deal is more likely to be a fait accompli before the headlines catch up. He learned the politics of this: how to work with governments and unions, how to navigate regulatory scrutiny in multiple jurisdictions, how to build local managers while keeping strategic control. The result is an empire that is expansive, but surprisingly resilient. A turning point arrived in late 2025 when EPH agreed a landmark partnership with Total Energies. In a deal that reshapes the map of Europe's flexible power generation, EPH sold a 50% stake in its Western European power generation platform to Total Energies in an all-stock transaction that effectively swapped EPH's power assets for a significant shareholding in a global energy giant. The transaction folded gas-fired plants, battery storage, and biomass assets across the UK, France, Italy, and the Netherlands into a joint venture designed to provide flexible capacity as renewables expand across Europe. And in return, Křetínský secured a meaningful stake in Total Energies itself. The deal was as much strategic as it was financial. It allowed EPH to monetize mature assets while retaining long-term exposure to the power market through a major industry partner. That transaction is emblematic of Křetínský's current thinking. He does not appear content merely to accumulate. He wants scale that makes him a system player. By swapping direct ownership of plants for a stake in an integrated energy multinational, he reduced concentrated operating risk while staying positioned to benefit from the energy transition and continued electricity demand growth, particularly the flexible, dispatchable generation that will be necessary as solar and wind increase their share of total generation. Across his career, he has been both opportunist and strategist. The opportunist shows up when a market is underpriced or a company is distracted. Take the supermarket and retail positions that surged when grocery valuations softened or when incumbents struggled. The strategist emerges when he composes larger trades, like the Total Energies joint venture, that move entire market structures rather than just individual balance sheets. His reach has not been without controversy. Large, cross-border deals inevitably draw scrutiny. Regulators in several countries have questioned EPH's motives, its financing structures, and the long-term implications for energy security and employment. Critics worry about concentration and political influence, especially when energy assets are critical to national infrastructure. Supporters point to the investments EPH has made to keep plants running and to maintain energy supply during turbulent periods in European energy markets. Whether you view him as a savior of inefficient assets or a shrewd consolidator of strategic resources depends on where you stand and on whether you are inside or outside his boardroom. There is a softer side to his public persona as well, albeit one he seldom broadcasts. He collects art and has quietly supported cultural and philanthropic causes. He has also become involved in football. He is a co-owner and director at West Ham United and has been deeply involved in Sparta Prague, one of the Czech Republic's most storied clubs. Sports ownership is a modern billionaire's shorthand for social presence. It projects local loyalty, but it also offers a global brand. For Křetínský, who spends time in Prague and Paris, and who navigates boardrooms across Europe, sports and culture are avenues to connect capital to communities. Bloomberg, there's an important human element to all of this. Křetínský's path is not just about deals, it's about timing, temperament, and the capacity to listen. Lawyers learn to parse nuance, and he built a team that could execute across legal and operational boundaries. The result is a playbook that can be summarized in 3 moves. Identify fragmented or undervalued assets, acquire controlling or influential stakes, and integrate those assets into a network that multiplies cash flow and strategic leverage. That approach has converted industrial properties and retail chains into a web of cash-generative businesses that can be folded, sold, or partnered depending on bigger market opportunities. Of course, no biography of a contemporary billionaire is complete without the question of scale. How big is his fortune? Estimates vary with market movements and the constant reshaping of asset structures. As of late 2025, major financial trackers placed his net worth in the multi-billion-dollar range, a reflection of the value of EPH's holdings, his retail stakes, and his newly acquired position in Total Energies. Net worth is a shifting number. It rises and falls with markets, corporate transactions, and the valuation of private assets. But the broader point is fixed. Křetínský's influence now sits beside the major industrial and financial groups of Europe. What does the future hold? The logic of Křetínský's empire suggests several likely paths. 1. Continued consolidation, where he either buys more assets that fit into his industrial map or swaps assets into stakes in global players, as he did with Total Energies. 2. Deeper moves into services that complement his retail and logistics footprint. Think last-mile delivery, e-commerce intermediation, or expanded food service logistics. 3. A strategic pivot into green infrastructure, whether through battery storage, biomass conversion, or investments that make thermal and gas assets less carbon-intensive. Kretinsky's choices will be influenced by changing regulation, the cost of capital, and Europe's accelerating energy transition, but his playbook is flexible enough to exploit each of those forces. There is also a geopolitical dimension. Energy is political. Owning power plants, pipelines, and trading desks across several countries places Kretinsky at the crossroads of energy security debates, national politics, and European market design. That proximity to power requires delicate navigation, maintaining relationships with governments, ensuring stable employment in local communities, and demonstrating that private ownership can deliver reliable supply at acceptable social cost. Whether private capital plays a constructive role in Europe's energy transition is a question that will partly be answered by how EPH and similar conglomerates balance profit and public responsibility. Personality matters in understanding such figures. Kretinsky is often described as private and cerebral. He does not court tabloids or Twitter storms. That secrecy is a strategic asset. Discretion affords leverage. When markets notice his moves, they already have shifted. When he quiets a controversy, it tends to dissipate into business as usual. But that discretion also breeds speculation. Journalists and politicians fill the silence with questions about motives and long-term intentions. The paradox of privacy in a public role is that silence can both protect and provoke. For aspiring dealmakers, his story offers several lessons. First, industry fluency matters. He did not buy into industries he didn't understand. Second, the value of cross-sector thinking. He combined energy and retail with media and logistics to create synergies and optionality. Third, control is a double-edged sword. It allows decisive action, but it invites scrutiny. Finally, timing and execution trump flash. The biggest wins came from disciplined accumulation and carefully structured exits or partnerships, not from headline chase. The arc of his career also raises questions about the changing nature of European capitalism. Where once national champions were built with close ties to states and banks, new empires now arise from private capital and cross-border structures. Kretinsky is emblematic of that shift, a Central European entrepreneur who found leverage in Western European markets, applying lessons from post-communist privatization to modern corporate consolidation. His path is, in some ways, a mirror of Europe's own economic evolution, from fragmented national markets to an integrated, if politically complicated, single market. Of course, there are critics. Some see consolidation as reducing competition and increasing vulnerability to private actors whose incentives may not align with public interest. Others worry about the opacity of private deals and the endurance of external governance when market conditions change. Kretinsky's defenders counter that his investments have often preserved operations that might otherwise have been shuttered, and that private capital can mobilize faster than state actors when industries need retooling. The debate is not purely academic. It will shape regulatory choices, investment flows, and the texture of European industry for years to come. His most recent moves suggest he is thinking even bigger than national champions. By aligning with a global energy giant, exchanging direct operational control for strategic shareholding in a multinational, he has shown a willingness to sit at the table where global industrial strategy is made. That has implications. It reduces direct operating exposure while amplifying strategic influence across the energy supply chain. It is a bet that the future of energy will be decided by integrated players who can manage fuel, generation, and trading at scale. So where does that leave us? When the dust settles on any one deal, Kretinsky's pattern is clear: acquire, optimize, and convert either through sale, partnership, or integration into a more powerful position. Whether he is buying supermarkets, media houses, or power stations, the aim is the same: to assemble a network that delivers predictable cash flow, strategic optionality, and the ability to act when windows of opportunity appear. In an era of rapid technological and regulatory change, that ability to adapt is the core commodity. The story of Daniel Kretinsky is not yet complete. He is a builder of scale in an era that prizes both sustainability and resilience, and he operates where capital, politics, and daily life intersect. As Europe grapples with energy security, inflationary pressures, and a shifting retail landscape, The choices he makes will ripple across balance sheets and headlines. What started in Brno with a legal education has become an experiment in how private capital can reshape public infrastructure. For profit, certainly, but also with consequences that will be debated in parliaments, trading floors, and dinner tables alike. In the end, the measure of his legacy will be less about the size of his fortune and more about the industries he remade. Did he shepherd a pragmatic transition that kept lights on and jobs intact while nudging Europe toward a cleaner energy mix? Did his retail plays stabilize struggling chains and preserve local commerce? Or did consolidation concentrate too much power in private hands? Those questions will be answered slowly in regulatory filings, in boardroom minutes, and in the long arc of European industrial history. Until then, watch the deals. That, more than any press release or interview, is where Křetínský tells his story. Not with sound bites, but through the patient architecture of acquisition, integration, and strategic partnership. It is a way of doing business that leaves the headlines to catch up, and it is precisely why markets label him not merely a billionaire, but a system builder. Someone who understands that in modern capitalism, influence is assembled quietly, one carefully timed move at a time.